You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by the National Association of Convenience Stores.
We got speed? That's a movie term. It has nothing to do with podcasts. But I threw that out there because today we're going to be talking about movies and where convenience stores fit in and all that. My name is Jeff Leonard. I'm with the National Association of Convenience Stores.
And I'm John Eichberger with NACS and the Fuels Institute. And this is a show where we talk about things that fuel you, your body, your car, 24/7.
And your mind, and sometimes your funny bone. So what we're going to do today is, our guest today is Mike Klein. He's a writer, and in 2007 he did a really fantastic article for NACS Magazine looking at convenience stores in the movies. And along the way, talked to some pretty significant people, let's put it this way. The Academy Awards this year are hosted by Chris Rock. Yeah, he talked to him for the article. So welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Let's just start with the basic premise. You came to NACS a couple of years ago, and you said, I think a really cool story to tell is where convenience stores fit in the movies.
Yeah, that's right. And it fits all over. It's in movies, and it's in TV. Convenience stores are an interesting setting. It's not just a punchline, as we hear a lot of times it can be. But there are a lot of movies, and obviously one of the most notable ones, one of the most famous ones, I think the one that comes to mind for people first is Clerks, Kevin Smith's movie that kind of launched his career, that takes place in a convenience store where he actually worked. And so that was kind of the genesis of it. And we just tried to talk to Kevin, but we couldn't get a hold of him.
Now, he said the reason that he used that setting was because he had access, and he wasn't able to build a palace, but he had access to a convenience store. Right.
He tells that story that so I don't remember if he was talking to or he saw an interview with Robert Rodriguez, who said that you make a movie about what you know, or take an inventory of what you know. And what he knew was he had access to a convenience store because he worked there, and his buddies and hockey equipment, and he decided to make a movie using those things.
And he has another movie coming out shortly starring his daughter, also set in a convenience store, this time in Canada.
We'll wait and see what happens there.
It's called Yoga Hosers. It sounds like it might be going direct to
a red box near you.
Yes, yeah. Which is also outside of convenience stores.
Right.
Another famous movie, or another famous line from convenience stores, is Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Something's afoot at the Circle K.
Right. Yeah. A famous one. And also that one also made me think of what does it say anything? John Cusack's pining over his girlfriend, and he wanders outside. He's outside the Gas and Sip, and these skateboard kids are out there giving him all this advice, relationship advice, and he says, if you guys know so much about women and relationships, what are you doing outside the Gas and Sip? Drinking Slurpees at 3 a.m. or whatever it is, and they say it's by choice, man.
By choice.
It's a very similar experience to the Circle K, the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
I mean, why? From your perspective, I mean, we know you already mentioned because you have access to it and it's part of it. Why do you think convenience stores are featuring so often in pop culture?
I think it's something, and we talked about this a little bit in the article, or a lot of the writers that I spoke to talked about it. It's something that is a common experience, right, that everybody kind of knows. Not everybody's been in the International Space Station. Not everybody's walked on another planet. Pretty much everybody's been to a convenience store. Everybody knows what they can expect at a convenience store. So you have that right away as a writer looking for something, a place that people will connect with. Convenience store is a good one because everybody has that experience. And one of the writers that I talked to, a Hollywood guy, said the 7-Eleven he goes to, billionaire David Geffen goes there, and the homeless guy, crazy homeless guy in the street, that's where he gets his box from that he lives in. So everybody kind of goes there and you have that experience. The other thing is that as a setting, it's a very interesting and unique place because there's constant traffic. And as a writer, if you're trying to find some kind of interesting place, think about Cheers in a bar. People are constantly coming in and out. These are the kind of settings that work. And a convenience store is one. You've got that bell rings and a new person's walked through the door. And as a writer, you can do anything you want with it. It can be David Geffen, it can be a homeless person, it can be a criminal, it can be anybody. Yeah,
because as you mentioned, the people coming through that door, they're not the same type of person. There's no homogeneity. What's the word? It's not a homogeneous group of people coming through. It's definitely all walks of life because everybody needs to get something. And I think, Jeff, the number is 160 million people come to a convenience store every day, which is half the United States population.
Yeah, so half of them would be familiar with the location, and considerably fewer will be familiar with the space station.
Right. Right. And so as a writer, you can have fun with that because you said you can make anybody walk through that door and you can have any interaction, and it kind of creates that drama, or it gives you the setting to create that drama where people can meet from all different walks of life. Because even if you drive, a Maserati, you still have to get gas. And I think that Steve Pink, one of the writers that I talked to and directors that I talked to, said, he sees a Rolls Royce or a Bentley parked next to a Pinto where a coat wire is holding the bumper on. All these people need to go to the convenience store. They need to go to a gas station at some point.
And Steve Pink is fairly well known in the movie circles. He co-wrote Grosse Pointe Blank,
right,
which has a famous scene with a convenience store in it. What you had talked about is it's a good transition for a couple of things. First off, people know about it. It's also a good handoff point where hitman can be in the store, and then all of a sudden another hitman joins him, and mayhem ensues.
Right. In Grosse Pointe Blank, it's really a funny scene and a funny sequence. John Cusack plays a hitman who's depressed, suffers from depression, and he goes back to his hometown of Grosse Pointe, Michigan. He goes back for a high school reunion, and he's kind of he's lovesick. He doesn't like his job. He's just kind of suffering this angst, and he decides to go back and visit his childhood home. And when he gets there, he finds that his childhood home has been knocked down and turned into a convenience store and gas station. And it just hits his character at the exact wrong time in his life. And he's just depressed, and he's wandering around the store in what used to be his house, that his bedroom was here and his father's favorite chair was there. And now it's an end cap display or something. And he keeps looking at the clerk and saying, "What are you doing here? I don't understand. What are you doing here?" And, he comes back to the store a couple times, I think, and he has these moments. And then there's the one moment when, in the movie, hitmen are trying to kill hitmen, and somebody shows up. One of the hitmen shows up at the store and tries to kill him while he's hiding in the aisles of what used to be his house.
And became an Ultramart, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what was his line? Wasn't it something like, they say you can't go home again, but you can...
You can shop there.
You can shop there, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of our favorite movies that reference convenience stores or gas stations is The Jerk.
Right. That's a great one. It makes me laugh just thinking about it. Steve Martin as the jerk gets a job in the gas station, and this is back when there used to be a full service, and there the oil cans display in between the things, and M. Emmett Walsh is a lunatic who's trying to assassinate Steve Martin's character, and he starts shooting, and he's missing, and he starts hitting the oil cans, and the cans start springing leaks, and Steve Martin looks at them, and he sees that the cans have sprung a leak, and then he finally realizes that someone's shooting at him, so he runs to a soda machine. And Emmett Walsh starts shooting at the soda machine, and the soda cans start to explode. And he runs into the store, and there's a big thing of Quaker State oil. And again, the cans start exploding. And Steve Martin draws the obvious conclusion and says he hates these cans. Everybody get away from the cans. He's shooting the cans.
So I've used a screen capture from that movie for a lot of my speeches on gas prices, because Steve Martin puts a sign in the window that says, "Gas prices. If you have to ask, you can't afford them."
And gas price at the time, I believe, was 79 cents.
Yeah, about that. It was 1979, right? That's the year when this movie came out, yeah.
That's one of the things, actually, that I enjoy a lot about movies, particularly movies that are filmed, on location. They have that, like, New York gritty. And I was actually watching Taxi Driver recently. And one of the things that's so kind of interesting about it, and something that I connect with and find interesting, is you see in the background when they're filmed on location and they don't really have control over these things, you get to see things like the price of milk or the price of a gallon of gas. And there's a moment in Taxi Driver, he's just walking down the street, and you see in the background, has nothing to do with the scene, you just see in the background the gas is 75 cents a gallon. It's just kind of an interesting kind of thing. It just takes you out of the movie for a second to think about.
And also Steve Martin, he's from Amarillo, Texas, and the local store in Amarillo, it's not Amarillo, it's some other town in Texas. I just blew the rest of that. But the local store is Swifty Surf. And he used he asked for permission to get the store branded as his local store. And that was in celebration of Abilene.
Gotcha.
There you go. Hey, you found it. It starts with an A, right?
Department of Energy.
Talk about looking at things in the movies and seeing, the price is just kind of a reference point. I came across recently just from last year, a short film that takes place at a convenience store gas station from Marvel, from the Marvel universe, and it's called "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Thor's Hammer," in which Clark Gregg, the actor who plays Agent Coulson, is on his way to investigate Thor's hammer, and he stops to fill up his car, which is branded as an Acura because I think that's who's paying for part of it. And he goes in to the convenience store and there's an attempted robbery and he thwarts it. But I noticed that when he fills up the gas, it's $3.39 a gallon. It's just one of those things that now, of course, where we would flip out at $3.39 a gallon. Although I don't know what it is in California.
It kind of sets up a timestamp for you.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
Those who are paying attention to have an idea. That's probably in the 2013 time frame that it was filmed.
Right.
So, and you mentioned in the article, there is obviously a lot of fodder to be used in writing a storyline around a convenience store surrounding the negative perceptions of it. But there's also a lot of positives to it. So from what you've seen, is there does there seem to be a balance or is it tilting one way or another?
Yeah, well, I think your first reaction is that it's going to be negative, that it's going to go to stereotype, it's going to be a punchline. And in fact, I started to make a list of movies and TV shows that reference in some way convenience stores or gas stations. And I found that actually I had a lot more in the positive column than in the negative column. And the ones in the negative column, I had things like Clerks because, of course, they're although I know Richard Onslager chose to find the good in those guys, that they were dedicated to their job and they were ingenious and stuff. But the reality is if they were your employees, you would fire them in a second. But Clerks and Raising Arizona, Thelma Louise, and Falling Down, that all kind of hinge on that the violence and that feeling of overpriced and price gouging and stuff that all kind of get there. Futurama, I put in the negative column because it's a little bit of indifference, although it's a great line in Futurama when the clerk says to Bender and Fry, our policy is if you're unsatisfied for any reason, I hate you. And pushes a button and a little thing comes and kicks them out the door. But a lot more of them are positive. They should, in fact, like in the movie Head of State, which was Chris Rock's movie that I talked to Chris Rock about. He wrote and directed and starred in it. And I think it might have been his first movie he directed. He plays a guy he's a city councilman and he ends up running for president. And his love interest works in the convenience store gas station, and she's actually the only one in the movie who has any kind of moral compass and is the one who is the voice of reason and the voice of morals throughout this piece. And I asked him about why he chose a convenience store, and he actually said that he didn't put a lot of thought into it, which I was hoping that he had put a lot of thought into it. But he said it was something that a place that everybody knows, a place that everybody goes. They had to meet somewhere. Where does everybody go? Everybody goes to a convenience store or gas station. So that's why he chose that. And then in other movies, I mean, The Jerk we talked about and Mad Mad World, they're really just settings. They're not – so I would say they're positive because they're places where people go. In Juno, which came out after the article was written, Rainn Wilson plays the clerk in the convenience store, and he's Juno's friend. He's Ellen Page's friend, and they kind of have very nice conversations, and he's just a good guy, and it's just a place where she goes. It's about an unwanted teen pregnancy, and that's where she gets her pregnancy test. She keeps getting pregnancy tests over and over again, hoping that the answer will be different. And he kind of has a line. He says it's not. She keeps shaking the pregnancy test to try to change the plus sign to a negative, and he says it's not an Etch-a-Sketch. You can't do it. But then there are others like Mad About You that we talked about in the article. Which
Mad About You, the TV show.
The TV show that focused on one of those convenience stores, kind of a corner delicatessen in New York City, where the clerk was actually kept saving the day. It was a Thanksgiving episode where the family, all kinds of drama and things were going wrong, and this clerk kept saving the day, whatever they needed. And in the end, what they needed was like 3 or 4 turkeys because they kept flying out the window or falling out the window, or the dog would eat them or whatever. He kept saving the day. It was a positive influence, In Shaun of the Dead, it starts. That's actually kind of how they said it. The movie starts with Simon Pegg just kind of walking in a haze, kind of sleepy. He walks into his convenience store. He does a little transaction. He leaves, and it's actually the setup for once the zombies start appearing. He repeats the action, the same thing, and you see everything is the same except there are now zombies around him. But it's this going to the convenience store. It's something he does every day. It's a regular occurrence, and so it's not a negative connotation at all. It's just a positive part of this guy's life. He starts every day at the convenience store.
And Zombieland, I don't know where that fits in there. Zombieland is a movie about zombies. And bad news is the zombie apocalypse started because somebody had a tainted hamburger at the Gas and Gulp or some name like that. That's the negative. The positive is Woody Harrelson's character loves Twinkies, and all he cares about is finding Twinkies, which we happen to be very good at selling. So I guess that's kind of zombie apocalypse favorite snack item, kind of a wash.
Yeah, I would call it a wash. One of the reasons why I think it can be perceived negative, I think, within the industry, is it is a setting, as we said. Creates a setting for high drama, right? It creates a backdrop. It's set for high drama, and one of those things, unfortunately, is crime. And there is an association that because of the nature, the 24-hour nature, the cash business, this is an area that attracts crime. Maybe that this is a business that attracts crime, and so you see that kind of as the setting. For example, in Raising Arizona. He tries to rob that convenience store. Nicolas Cage tries to rob that convenience store 3-4 times. He never is successful, and the clerk literally fights him off once. But that's kind of the connotation I think you get, this crime backdrop. In My Cousin Vinny, it's where the initial crime takes place, which the guys aren't involved in, but it's a robbery gone wrong at the Sack of Suds.
Yep, Sack of Suds.
Sack of Suds convenience store. That would have been a good trivia question.
So I think it's important that you point out that whether the depiction of the industry in these movies is positive or negative, the bottom line is basically they're acknowledging that this is a part of Americana.
Absolutely.
I mean, it is an institutional element of our culture throughout the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah. And I think it's one, too, that is, though there may be positive and negative elements to it, it's most of them, as I see, you look at this list, most of the filmmakers, I think, choose to make it a positive to a neutral environment as opposed to something like fast food. Fast food places tend to be, when they're portrayed in a movie, they tend to be negative, and that's a public, kind of as the public kind of turns on fast food and junk food and stuff. And you see it, in fact, Kevin Smith from Clerks did it in Clerks 2. And in Clerks 2, the sequel, the convenience store burns down and they get jobs at a fast food place, and then ultimately decide to pool their money and reopen the store. And then he also did it in Dogma, which was a send-up of kind of corporate culture, but particularly that kind of fast food culture. It's negative. For the convenience stores, because people's experience for the most part is positive. You go in because you need something, right? Whether it's gas or Twinkies or whatever it is, you go in because you need something and you get it.
And in a perfect example, we haven't talked about The Simpsons yet.
Right.
That's probably a whole episode right there. And on one standpoint, Apu, the store clerk / owner, sometimes puts 48-hour shifts in. He sells stamps, 40-cent stamps for $1.85?
It's a 29-cent stamp for $1.85.
Yeah. And yes, if a donut falls on the ground and collects dirt, it's called sprinkles, and he marks it up. Right. So that's the negative. The positive is when you think about the community, he's central to it. He's central to how the community operates. And despite that whole sprinkles and out-of-code product, et cetera, he's a pretty decent guy.
Well, I don't know if it's decent to sell $2 worth of gas for $4.20, but which is a good one. But I've actually, and I know you're a big Simpsons buff and you know it, but I kind of put that one in the negative column because there were so many stereotypes and because it was so much really played up on that really price gouging thing. But it is a central point. It's in almost every episode. I don't know how many Simpsons episodes don't have a stop or a shot at the Quickie Mart. I think they all do. But I don't know. It did seem as, Apu and Snake, the guy who's perennially robbing him, it's kind of it kind of seems like a foil. But I don't know if you disagree that you think. To me, I just come away with a lot of negative feelings about it.
Well, I definitely agree with that part, although I did laugh the one time that Snake robbed the store wearing a Middlebury shirt. And it was right around the time Middlebury is named the most expensive college in the country. And without saying a word, they conveyed something that was kind of funny. Right. But, yeah, I agree that you do one of the challenges with The Simpsons is it's perpetually set in the late 80s. Mm-hmm. And everything at the end of the show, nobody ever grows up. Homer never gets smarter and is usually getting dumber. But it's essentially set in the 80s, and some of those stereotypes that our industry had in the 80s are conveyed forward. A couple weeks ago on The Simpsons, there was an episode where one of Apu's relatives opened a upscale convenience store. It was dedicated to millennials. It sold all kinds of fresh food and healthy items because that's what millennials want. And it was a robust, very good-looking store. Now, on the other hand, that totally conveys where a good segment of our industry is moving. Now, of course, at the end, then the store has to fail because Apu didn't have a job and all that. So I think they unplugged the electricity, so all the misters stopped working, and then all the produce just immediately just
browned.
Yes. And then Apu probably sold them. But Yeah, I think it is a mixed bag, but it really is just going back to those perceptions. And I think as our industry looks and takes a more lighthearted look at some of these things, you realize that sometimes it's not necessarily a point of contention when they're picking on us. It's more like, hey, we're really familiar with you,
right? And
we use you guys a lot,
right? I think that people should keep keep an open mind about it. And as you said, it's an institution, right? And it's an institution that pretty much everybody can relate to. You said half of Americans visit one every day. So this is something that people are just familiar with and just bask in that. And if they want to poke a little fun at you, they're probably poking fun at everybody else.
So, I mean, you see it a lot in the movies, you see it a lot on TV, you see it in commercials. So there's the new Troy Aikman commercial, which I don't even know what's it about, but his phone rings. We're passed by Troy Aikman. He was living in the past, but he's in a convenience store. Music, I mean, just replete with references. As you mentioned, the center of the community and the Quickie Mart got me thinking of a Green Day on the American Idiot soundtrack, and it's Jesus of Suburbia. 7-Eleven is a center of the universe. I mean, and if you think about it, in some communities, the convenience store is the central place for that whole community. It is their grocery store, it's their energy place, it's their meeting place, it's everything. And that there, I think, leads a lot to the argument, why is it being featured in so many, or at least included in so many popular cultural things, movies, TV, music, you name it. You really can't get away from hearing about this industry.
Right. And I think it's kind of like the general store, right? The evolution of the general store, which there's a good trivia question that we can say for the end about general stores. But you're right. It's that kind of central meeting place. It's that central place where everybody goes. I am surprised that there's not a TV show in the United States that centers on, given what you have here with just an ever revolving door with characters coming through, that they don't have one. I know there's one in Canada. Jeff, we've talked about it before, and I've only seen half of one episode when I was up in Canada. But you saw it's called Gas? Corner Gas.
Yeah, it's not good.
Well, I only saw half, then I saw that it
should say not good.
It wasn't good, eh?
And it was about convenience stores.
Right.
At the other end of the spectrum.
Such a hoser.
Yoga hoser is Kevin Smith. Yeah. At the other end of the spectrum, from the Newt Good, is Academy Award winning. You spoke to some of the people associated with Booty Call, which unfortunately did not win an Oscar.
No.
However, one of the actors in that was probably by Snake. Was Jamie Foxx, who did win an Academy Award.
Yes, a few years later, yes.
And you also talked to the 2016 Academy Award host, Chris Rock.
Yeah.
When you talk to Chris Rock, which is, first off, it's pretty cool to be able to talk to Chris Rock about anything, let alone convenience stores for NACS Magazine. I know you also you did some homework and you looked at James Lipton's series. When you see a convenience store, what do you see?
Right.
And so you posed, I guess the question was more, when you see something, you see things differently when you're writing through that lens. And so you asked some questions of Chris, and take us through some of those.
Gosh, I hope I remember all of them. Are they here? One of the things I did ask him was why a convenience store for head of state, as I said, and he really said it was something that people were familiar with. Everybody was, that everybody kind of goes there and everybody knows it. In terms of what you see, I think I said to him, what do you see when you see convenience store? He was actually very, in talking to him, and I called him at home. I got the opportunity to talk with him at home, and he was kind of in between taking his kid from school to karate practice or whatever it was. And he was kind of, I would describe him as subdued. And he's not a guy who needs to be on all the time. And that was quite evident by our conversation. And I wasn't expecting to be on and, doing voices or making me laugh or anything. But he was just a very subdued guy. And it was clear to him that he didn't really think about it. He just said, well, it's just I wanted someplace where people go. And I think people need things, and that's what they do. He was just very kind of matter of fact about it. He did say he was talking about that familiarity that people have with it. And he said, you need something where people are coming in all the time. If you're in the cockpit of a plane, no one's coming into the cockpit of a plane. Space
we
shuttle,
hope.
No one's, well, right. No one's coming in to the space shuttle. In a convenience store, that bell rings, people are coming through all the time. So that was just, kind of why he chose it and why he chose to write about it.
I think this has been a great conversation. I think what I'm taking away from it is people do get kind of ruffled. They see Simpsons, they see negative connotations of their industry, and the immediate reaction some in the industry is, that's my world. How dare you make fun of it? But I've always felt that they're not talking about you, then you're not making a difference. You're not making an impact. And the fact of the matter is, everybody's talking about this industry. Positive, negatively, honestly, it doesn't really matter, because it is just a testament to the importance of the convenience channel in American life on a day-to-day basis. Music, TV, movies, if they're talking about you, you must be doing something right.
And we'll have to put Steve Carell on the clock, because he's one of the many that has worked in our industry. I know he used to work at a Store 24, for those of you in New England.
Yeah, right. That's right. We had a Store 24 in New York. That's where we used to buy our Schaefer in college for $1.99 a six-pack. Well, there's a cultural timestamp.
There you go.
But he worked at Store 24, and he said some of his early characters that he developed were based on characters that he served in the convenience store, and I'm sure he saw all kinds. And I believe he bought a general store in New England. I don't know if it qualifies as a convenience store or not. Yeah. But it's a general store. It's like what John was talking about, the store in the community that you come to, you gather, and you buy stuff. Well, that was my trivia question that I was going to ask Jeff and try to stump him with, is what Academy Award nominee worked in a convenience store and owns one. And I would consider that to be it's the Marshfield General Store, which is a money-losing operation, he said. He's owned it since 2009 or 8, I think. And it's that meeting place. It's where everyone goes, and he's got everything, the penny candy and the milk, and they don't sell gasoline, but everything else in the store. And it is that central place, and it's where people go for the newspaper, and people come and talk, and they sit and they hang out, and it's that central place. And that was why he bought it, because he said he didn't want it to disappear. He felt that part of America was disappearing, and once it's gone, it's gone. And he wanted to kind of preserve it. So they came to him. His sister-in-law lives in the town, and said, this store is going out of business. And he said, well, let's just get it.
Jeff, maybe it's time for NACS TV to put on a series about a convenience store, a la Cheers.
Well, I think first off, we need to have Mr. Carell do his next movie about that store. Then he can kind of run a couple expenses through there as business expenses. Bring out some of those big names. We can have the big premiere. We can do all that stuff. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. So we can run the premiere in convenience stores. 160 million people can see it opening weekend.
That's the closing day of the show.
Yeah. You can put it on your fuel TV. You can have it above your gas pumps.
Well, thank you, Mike. And
thank you.
Tremendous article in NACS Magazine. We'll have it online. And also, you a website. Was it Michael Klein Writes?
Sure. Yes.
Michael Klein Writes.
Yeah, sure.
It will be shortly. Or take a look at some of the articles that we have on nacsonline.com. And thank you for listening to Convenience Matters.
You've been listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. For more information about the National Association of Convenience Stores, go to nacsonline.com.